abbiamo adesso in linea Nicola Centofanti, membro del Parlamento del South Australia nella Camera Alta, la Legislative Council, lo dico di nuovo, Legislative Council. Buon pomeriggio. Thank you, Nicola, for taking this call from Radio Italia 1 Adelaide.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you for having me. Thank you to your listeners.
Yes, well, first of all, congratulations. It's been a while now since you were elected, but congratulations for being elected to the Legislative Council. Yes, I can get that right now. And let's talk a little bit about your background, what you aim to do, because you've not been a career politician like so many others, and then something about your Italianness, where that Centofanti name comes from.
Absolutely. So a little bit about me. So I was born in the Riverland and I grew up in the Riverland. I grew up on a citrus orchard, though back in those days we had some stone fruit on there as well. So stone fruit and navels and valencias were predominantly what we grew. And I the local primary school in the Riverland. So grew up spending most of my summers cutting apricots and occasionally feathering vines, to save up enough money to buy the latest CD that I was pretty keen on. And then I was fortunate enough to get the scores to be accepted into veterinary school. But in those days, and I'm showing my age now, Antonio, in those days there was no veterinary school in South Australia. So we had to go to either Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane or Perth. And the school that I got into was Murdoch University over in Perth in Western Australia. So I was a very young 17-year-old country girl. I packed up my bags and I flew all the way over to Perth and I studied veterinary science for 5 years. And it was a wonderful experience. It was very daunting for me at the time, being, like I said, a country girl, and hadn't really been, had been on family trips, obviously, but hadn't spent any extended time away from home. So, but I made some wonderful friendships, and obviously, studied for that 5-year period before heading back to South Australia. But I always knew I wanted to come back to South Australia because I love this state. I love its places and I love its people.
Okay, so you've worked as a vet after your studies, right, in the Riverland?
Yep. So I worked at the Riverland veterinary practice for the next 15 years, and that's a mixed animal practice. So mixed animal practice basically just means we do, both small animals, the cats, the dogs, the bunnies, all of the above, the birds, but also we do the production animal side of things as well. So predominantly sheep and beef. We don't have any dairy cattle in the Riverland, and also obviously horses or equines. So, we were certainly a veterinary practice that had the philosophy of, anything that walked through the door, we would certainly try and, treat to the best of our ability. And in fact, it was a while ago, circus come through, and there was a macaque monkey that was having some issues with some diarrhea, and I was the pick to treat the monkey. So look, treated a number of different species in my time as a vet, and the Riverland veterinary practice to me was a really good eye-opener into the important role that farmers have and vets have, the important role that they play in biosecurity in our state. So, and obviously I've taken that with me now into my shadow portfolio as primary industries.
Yes, okay, well that was a good segue. I was thinking as you were talking about all these different species of animals, I a doctor who would look after their dog using human principles and then occasionally go to the vet when that wasn't quite working. So you're no, you've got into politics. How it's very recent, right? Just in the last election. Was this the first time you've run?
No,
Yes.
no,
No.
I actually came in on a casual vacancy in
Okay.
2020. Yeah, so Andrew McLaughlin, who was a member of the Legislative Council for the Liberal Party, he was actually elected into the Senate in 2020, so he created that casual vacancy, and then I was elected by our party to fill that casual vacancy in 2020, but then I was also up. So he was up for election at this state election in March 19th of this year. So I then was up for election in March 19th of this year, and very fortunate to be re-elected number 3 on that ticket.
Excellent, excellent. And so you've mentioned already that your portfolio of primary industries. Um, that's obviously an area that you come from, and you have good, obvious expertise. Uh, what are your plans? What are your thoughts about what we could be doing in that area?
Yeah, so I've actually got a number of portfolios, so not just primary industries. So I probably should go through them
Yep.
first. So I am Shadow Minister for Primary Industries, Shadow Minister for Regional South Australia, and Shadow Minister for Water Resources and the River Murray. So um,
Big topics.
I sort of say, so everything basically north of Jepps Cross is what I usually say to people. But, yeah, look, it's a portfolio that really suits me. I'm a country girl, born and bred in the country. I continue to live in the country. It's in my blood. And, I'm also from a river community. So I very much get the importance of, the Murray River and making sure that, the Murray River is healthy, but also that we're supporting our farmers and our producers, and the productivity that brings to our state. So, I think it's really about, getting a good balance with a lot of our portfolios. And I think in my with my 3 portfolios, they sort of really complement each other quite well as well. You think of primary industries and you predominantly think of the regions,
Yep.
because that's where our primary industries are based. I'm very much for ensuring that we promote our regions. We maintain the viability of our regions, but in doing that, we need to make sure that our regions have the appropriate infrastructure to ensure that if there is growth in our regions, that it's done in a sustainable manner. So, there's lots of things going on in all of my portfolios. I guess probably the biggest thing at the moment has been to do with my primary industries portfolio has been to do with the outbreaks of foot and mouth disease
Yes.
that we've seen in Indonesia. And then, obviously that extended into more specifically into Bali, which is obviously a very popular tourist destination for a lot of Australians and South Australians. So, that has been, I think, at the forefront of particularly people from the livestock industry, but certainly more broader from our regions, and also as well, the city have also, really, I think, understood the risk that that disease and other disease, there are other emergency animal diseases such as lumpy skin, which is also Indonesia, and what those risks pose to our livestock industry going forward. So it's been a busy time, and
Yes.
Tony.
Yes. 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 And now this name Centofanti, I I think I recognise it coming from the Abruzzo region, but maybe not.
Correct. No,
Yes.
you are very correct. Yes. So, predominantly from the town Sulmona,
Correct.
but also surrounding villages, Marane and Pacentro also. So, yeah, so I've got married name, so my
Yes.
husband's family. And they've got a fantastic, a really interesting history, particularly on my husband's dad's side. So what we call Nono's side. His dad worked for 3 years in Africa with the Italian army in a sort of about 1935. Just before the Second World War started, and he at that point in time, things were progressing, and it was likely that war was going to break out. And because he'd worked in the army, the lieutenant sort of said, "Look, I think if you can, you probably want to try and get out." So he fled Italy to Australia just before the Second World War. He actually married my husband's grandma, so Nana. He married Nana before he left for Australia, and he was actually sponsored by his brother-in-law at the time, who was already in Australia. So when Nono came to Australia, he got a job in a quarry in Adelaide, which I think was around the Campbelltown area. And then he worked in that quarry until the Second War broke out. And that was obviously when all of the Italians were gathered up and sent to internment camps around the state. And Nono was actually sent to the Loveday Internment Camp.
My grandfather was there
the
too.
Riverland.
My grandfather was at
There you
Loveday
go.
and several other places. Yeah, yes, okay.
Yeah. And so he was there until the war finished, but during that time, as you might know, they were actually allowed out on the weekends to go and find work and work on fruit growers' property to earn a little bit of money. And so he did that quite regularly until the war ended, and then he went back to Adelaide after the war ended, and he sent for Nana. And they bought a market garden property just out of Rostrevor and had their family. And then after a period of time, so in the 1960s, they decided to move back to the Riverland because, Nono really actually enjoyed that time of getting out onto, the fruit properties, and also as well, he was struggling with the cold weather and his health in Adelaide, and so he remembered the Riverland being warmer and a drier climate, so it was a little bit for his health as well. So they actually bought a fruit property in Winkie, which was a mixed fruit property, and that's where he stayed with his 5 children, and one of those who's is my father-in-law. So,
Yep.
And then my husband obviously lived in Winkie, and so did I at that, and still do. We still live in Winkie.
Yeah, so there's several generations on the Centofanti side. What about your lineage, your presence in South Australia?
Yeah, so my mum, so both my grandfathers on both sides, so my mum's side and my dad's side, upbringing in Waikerie in the Riverland, and they both worked on local, lots of local boards and in local government, believe it or not. And actually, it's a really interesting story because the two of my grandfathers, at the end of World War II, the government sort of opened up land for those war service settlers for fruit growing. But in those days, irrigation was via channels and furrows. And after the 1956 flood, irrigators were basically forced to move to higher ground. And it was during that time that my two grandfathers, that was Jack Andrew and Rex Coates, along with my a great uncle, Uncle Rex Andrew. They all worked together with an engineer called Bill Pollitt to devise basically the Golden Heights irrigation scheme, which was, the laying of galvanised pipes to concrete main lines and the formation of pumps. And so that, that sort of, I guess, innovative concept of land utilisation resulted in horticulturalists, some big horticulturists saw the establishment of, the household brands like Berry and Nippies and Angos and Angus Park. So, very, very proud of both of my grandfathers in that aspect as well.
Cool. Thank you. Well, I was to say thank you to Nicola Centofanti for giving us this introduction to her story and what you aim to do in the Parliament, and maybe we have some more conversations over time as these issues become relevant.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me, Antonio.
Okay, thank you very much.
See you. Bye.